Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're gonna revisit a dyeing project I filmed recently where I did something that was experimental and a little bit silly. In Dyepot PS60, I took some dry yarn, some dry acid dye powder, and I sprinkled the powder onto the dry yarn. Now, you can't dye yarn this way because you need the water so that way the dye molecules can come into contact with the fibers. But we added that by mixing some water with vinegar into a spray bottle and then spraying onto the yarn. And the result was really, really beautiful. We got this awesome speckled yarn. It had some larger patches of color similar to some yarn mops or dry rub things I've done in the past. But while I loved the results of this technique, I hated doing it. I hated taking the spray bottle and having to spray so many times. It took so long and it was a lot of pressure on my hand, and so I don't really want to do that again. So we're gonna try to do this in a bit of an alternate way. And that way involves my sink. Well, not the sink, but my faucet. Future Rebecca here, and I want to pop in to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much for being my lab partner today. I am so excited for you to see how this project is going to come together. But let's get back to it. I have an extendable faucet, and I can turn this into a sprayer. So my thought is that if I use low water pressure, that maybe we can do this instead of the spraying. And the nice thing is that I have a button so I can spray and stop as needed. So the sprayer should solve the issue of it taking a long time to get the water wet, and it was a pain to spray the spray bottle. Unfortunately, it leaves us with a new problem. How are we going to add acid into the yarn? Because one of the reasons why colors started to strike where they were placed, I think at least, was because we were adding that acid. And so as the dyes got wet, only a little bit of the yarn got wet, and so the dyes didn't spread a lot and we got all these speckles all over the place. So what we're gonna do today is also leave no dye behind, and I'm gonna take some dyes I've mixed with citric acid powder already and use those on the yarn. Now, the plus is that as it gets wet, the citric acid will get wet and that'll give us the acid. So that's a win. The downside is that since the citric acid is chunkier than straight dye powder, as we move the yarn around adding the dye, we're less likely to get the dye to spread as far from just moving it around as we may have if it was straight dye powder. Maybe, but who knows? We won't know what's gonna happen until we give this a shot, and so let's go try this. We're gonna start off with just 100 grams of Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Weight yarn. This is the same yarn base I used last time. It soaks up water really quickly, so I think it's a really great candidate. The yarn is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon, and if you want to learn more about it, I do have Knit Picks affiliate links down in the video description. As for our dyes, well, this one looks like it had some moisture, but I've got some leftover dye mixed with citric acid powder in a few different colors. Some might be chunkier, but we're gonna go for it because even if we don't end up with something like really conclusive or like what we had achieved last time, this will give us a bit of a feel of how we may need to shift things moving forward. But I think we might have some Dharma acid dyes in deep magenta, maybe electric violet, maybe Caribbean blue, and honestly, I'm not sure what else, but as we play with it, then maybe I'll remember. But these were all Dharma acid dyes. One last thing to do before we get ready to go, and I put on my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, because I always wear that safety equipment when I'm dealing with dry dye powder. But I'm setting up the steamer basket. And so I usually add just a couple inches of water to the bottom, and I'll go start heating this up so that way it'll be nice and steamy when we start dyeing the yarn. Unfortunately, my huge catering steam pan doesn't fit in the sink. When I wash it, I have to have it sort of leaning at an angle. So I'm going to use one of these smaller aluminum pans. And I could just have the yarn directly in the sink, but I don't want the yarn to get wet until we add water. At least that is my hope. But I am gonna add on a removable nylon zip tie because gotta do it. And I guess I'm gonna lay the yarn like this. And now finally I'm gonna go put on my respirator, safety glasses, and gloves so we can give this a shot. Now, we do have a fine powder here. I just don't know if the speckles that we'll end up with are gonna be bigger overall, because when I'm adding this dye in right now, maybe you can't see it from up where you are, but I can easily see it from where I am, and I definitely do not have a yarn mop today. Okay, I've got a paper towel mop. All right, I think that might have been some Caribbean blue is my best guess there. I don't mind ultimately if I mix up colors between these dyes that I have though. So you can see through here that we're getting a separation of those dye pigments. And things will move and drop, and this could result in speckles. It's just because like when the powder is milled even finer, we can get like even more coverage than speckles. So I don't know if this will work exactly the same. I'm not going to do every color on every side, but I think that this was some tornado gray, and I think I'm going to use all of it up right here. And yeah, we'll use it all up, and I'll just dump some of it on to help get some of that coverage I was talking about. This is probably electric violet, but honestly I don't know. Okay, I'm now going to flip the yarn very carefully, and you can hear a lot of that dye fall out. That is fine. That's going onto the pan. I have a feeling we'll end up doing some kind of leave no dye behind something with all of this. But, ooh, see, that's chunkier, because I think that there was probably some liquid that got in here at one point from doing other speckling projects. I'm going to bring in some more of what I think is that Caribbean blue. And then I think that this is deep magenta, but I don't remember, and it's always a mistake to not label your containers. Okay, where is the zip tie? And see, as I do this, I feel like a lot more dye is falling off, because just listen to that. So I think that the finer powder does stick to the yarn a little bit better. Not that this other dye won't stick, it's just all on the bottom. So on this final edge, let's make sure we have a fair amount of color. I know we already mostly did it, but doing a little bit of that. Some Caribbean blue. I'm definitely making a bit of a mess. I can see some dye in my sink. Okay, and I think, could be wrong, this might be some sea spray. So I'm going just a little bit heavy all over. But yeah, hard to say what the colors are on my fingertips because there was a little bit of everything. So this is what our yarn looks like dry. We have itty bitty little flecks all over it, but we know there's a lot on the bottom of the pan because you can just hear it fall when I lift the yarn. Okay, and now before we spray this, I do want to clean the sink, so I'm going to lift it up. But oh no, is that my sink is looking stained. That isn't good. That's not making me happy. We'll be scrubbing that later, but I'll set this, I'll just hold it. I also want to get the sprayer to where I think I want it. Okay, so then I can turn it on as soon as we're ready. I'm pulling the hose down to the side, turning it on, and I'm currently holding on to the stop button, and we're gonna go. I could have had this be a little more continuous, but my fear was that if I just left it on, then it would just get really wet way too fast. And I think we've got too much water coming out. Yeah, because it's just kind of dribbling. So I don't think this is quite working, because I'll zoom you in before we even add more water. We've got soft colors on here. Like, it looks cool. It looks very watercolory. But those colors are spreading out, because I think that the spray bottle gave such a little amount of liquid that it allowed the dyes to dissolve a bit, but it didn't allow them to soak that far into the yarn. But let's keep going. You know what? Let's just spray it. I mean, this is really, really pretty. And I'm able to get everything good and wet, I think. Should we move it? I guess we should move it, huh? Oh my. So what I'm seeing right now is almost no color on the backside. The positive is that we didn't get too much water on there at first. But the negative is that even with the other side being on the bottom, there isn't very much color here anymore. And we did add color all the way over our yarn. And so, yeah, we're getting something very uneven now. So I am going to just go ahead and, since we've got all this dye on the bottom, sort of submerge this, because yeah, I didn't want something like super uneven. Now, do we have a really cool effect here? Yeah, I mean, this yarn is really pretty. Whoops. I'm just adding more water at this point. And actually, most of that color has struck to the yarn that we had. So we had plenty of acid here. It's just that I think we had way too much water. And so if I find a way to add some acid to the sprayer, then we could go ahead and try this again. But in that circumstance, yeah, I guess we'd have to decide if we want straight dye powder or to try the powder with the citric acid. The good news is that the staining on my sink has gone away, so that is good. But now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go steam set this yarn for 30 minutes. While I muse about what happened and what we might be able to change going forward, I'm going to go take another skein of Knit Pick Stroll and add it to this remnant water we have. And then we're going to leave no dye behind and use up as much of these dyes as we can. There might be too much pink, I don't know, but we're just going to play with it and mix these dyes with citric acid with water and just mix everything together. Okay, hear me out. What would happen if I soaked yarn in water with vinegar and then let it dry? I wonder if we'd still have like the protein fibers, if they'd still be protonated. I don't know. I don't know, because like, yeah, I don't know if like the vinegar would still be there, and so then if there would be more acid in there, if that would help. But I think that the issue here is that there was too much water all at once, and also, well, yeah, because we may end up with a few speckles in there, but things really did spread out. But we got a really, really awesome wash of color. And so that light wash of color is unique and fun. So I don't know if there's a better way to make this work to get nice speckles, but as far as watercolor approaches go, this is really, really fun, and so this could be worth exploring more in the future. But you should all let me know down in the comments what you think about that. Once I was done adding all of my dyes to our second skein of stroller yarn mop, I waited for the steamer basket to become free and then put that yarn in the steamer basket for 30 minutes off camera. I finally realized what one of the colors was. It was not Sea Spray. I'm pretty sure it's Spearmint Breeze. And it really took dissolving the remnant dye in the container to figure that out. This is so pretty, and I had to pop in before I go and added it to the steamer basket because, oh my goodness, this is gorgeous. And the softness here. I know that like I was speckling, but man, the difference between having heat and adding the dye and moving things quickly and not having heat, the colors were still striking fast. You can see a lot of different segments of color, but not fast enough to be sharp speckles. And that's really interesting. Of course, someday when I try to replicate this on purpose, it's not gonna work, but we'll try. And now I'll go steam set it for 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes and we're gonna remove our first yarn. And then I'm gonna come over. There's like a hint of some purple in the water in the sink still. I know I said I was gonna do that off camera, but we've got our other yarn. A steam set for 30 minutes. A couple of the ChemKnits patrons gave me a really good suggestion, and that is to go to like a home improvement store like Lowe's and get one of those bottles that you attach to your hose. So something like you might use to spray, like, I don't know if you spray like a pesticide or Miracle-Gro or something. It's a bottle with liquid that when you attach the hose, some of that liquid comes out of the nozzle. And so if I can find an empty container like that, we could have vinegar in it, and then we could use the hose to mist and spray onto our yarn. And so that could be the best of all worlds. That could be the best bet if I can find something that works that didn't already have other chemicals in it, because you're not supposed to mix vinegar with all kinds of chemicals, and so I wouldn't want to mix things without knowing, so we'll see if I can find a sprayer like that. I found one on Amazon. It was like $8. Win. It's spring as I'm filming this. It is spring, the end of April 2023. I have not yet set up my garden hose because it still gets cold. So this is something we'll probably have to try this summer. I'm excited. Let's wash our yarn. Usually I transfer yarn I'm washing into like a white plastic basin, but we're just gonna use this tiny pan that we have. This is not the one I dyed in. That one has been rinsed already. This one was a clean one. So there should not be any color in the pan. And ultimately, our yarn isn't that saturated. Oh, that green though. The yarn isn't that saturated, so I'm not anticipating any bleeding. Probably added a little too much distillate though. But I am really amazed with how soft these colors turned out. And I'm now wondering if that spray bottle I bought, if I'm going to be able to have like a light spray, or if it's going to come out with too much force. So again, it was only like $8. We'll give it a try sometime. But if you have a more like mister option, let me know. Not that you can link to things in the comments, but let me know what to search for. But anyway, we're not seeing any color bleeding. I'm gonna go put the yarn through my spin dryer and hang it to dry. Here is the finished dry yarn, and let's take a closer look at the first skein that we dyed. There are some speckles in here. I mean, you can see some like tiny hints of color. It's just the water volume was too high. I think that there was too much water added at a time, maybe also not enough acid, and so things spread and they didn't strike quickly. Now, again, it could be some of the pigments that we had picked, and so that could be why we didn't see as much spread, but I don't really know. And it's also possible that because a lot of the powders fell to the bottom, those then dissolved and we got this more wash and tonal. Now this yarn is stunning still. It's very soft, has a very watercolored feel, and so it's beautiful. And this is a technique I would definitely try again because it worked well and it was easy to do. Sometimes a technique that is so laborious, even if it has beautiful results, it means I don't necessarily want to redo it. So I'm excited to try out the like sprayer attachment to my hose, adding some vinegar into that bottle. It's just, I need to make sure that when I add the vinegar in the bottle that I'm gonna go and do the spraying away from my lawn, because adding vinegar on top of a plant, it'll burn, when there's sunlight, it'll burn the leaves and kill the plant. So yeah, that's not something that I would like to do. Now in contrast, we have our second skein, and I like this one so much. Mainly, I like the other one as well, but this one is so saturated and the colors just blend into each other so much. I find it gorgeous. This, applying a lot of dye mixed with citric acid onto yarn that is low immersion but cool, letting that dissolve, you get some amount of some speckling in here, but a lot of color spread too, and they blended really softly. It just worked really well, and I'm gonna need to do this again. Now, one other thing that's a little bit fun is I've actually just filmed some conclusions for a Leave No Dye Behind that involved some of these colors. And so this is a tonal with just Caribbean blue, and that looks so good with either of these skeins because we've got pops of this color in both. But then I also have this tonal here that is mostly black, deep magenta, which is in both of these skeins, but then a little bit also the Caribbean blue, and that just works with the yarn. And so it was just fun to see like how much of a color palette I really have here that is just working so well. And the Leave No Dye Behinds, those were using dye stalks, not dye mixed with citric acid, and so they were from two completely different videos. I had just been using the same colors across multiple different videos because, I mean, the ones in those tonals are primaries. But anyway, I just thought that was fun. Michelle, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. And while I think both of these colorways are really beautiful, I'm gonna send you the more saturated one because that is my favorite. And whenever I have a lab partner and I dye multiple colorways in that video, I try to send my favorite to the lab partner because, I mean, I think that makes the most sense. If you would like to learn more about how you can become a lab partner or last minute lab partner, you can find more information in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, and I have links to the lab partner listings in all of my videos. Michelle, thank you again for being my lab partner today. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. And as I mentioned earlier, the sprayer attachment that I ordered while I was filming the video, it's arrived. I still haven't set up my hose, but that video is gonna come at some point because I bought a piece of equipment for it. Do you have any other silly types of videos that you think would be really fun for me to create? Please let me know down in the comments below because I very frequently draw video ideas from your questions and suggestions. And of course, if you want to help give feedback and help direct the direction that some of the videos go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. You can learn more at patreon.com/ChemKnits. Becoming a patron starts as low as $1 a month, and there's a lot of different options there. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.